Hi, my name is Margaret Power, and welcome to UAMS Grand Rounds, where I'll be talking about using wastewater as a source for drinking water. So hopefully today, I hope you take away the answers to the following questions that I will be discussing throughout this presentation. What does the product of water treatment look like? What defines water as being safe to drink? What is wastewater and why is it important? Is it feasible to use wastewater as a source of drinking water? Wastewater treatment has four major steps: coagulation and flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, and disinfection. Coagulation and flocculation is when chemicals with a positive charge are added to the water. The positive charge of these chemicals neutralizes the negative charge of dirt and other dissolved particles in the water. When this occurs, the particles bind with the chemicals and form larger particles called floc. Sedimentation is where floc settles to the bottom of the water supply due to its weight, and I've included here a picture that shows this process. So in filtration, once the floc has settled to the bottom of the water supply, the clear water on top will pass through filters of varying compositions such as sand, gravel, and charcoal, and pore sizes, in order to remove dissolved particles such as dust, parasites, bacteria, viruses, and chemicals. A water filter is composed of a screen with many microscopic holes. The smaller the holes, the more contaminants the filter can remove. Filter holes are measured in microns. Just to give you an idea of how big a micron is, the period at the end of a sentence is about 500 microns. When considering filter size, look for an absolute, not a nominal or average hole rating. The EPA and CDC recommend an absolute 1 micron filter, or one labeled for cyst removal, to remove cryptosporidium. Some contaminants and their sizes in microns are Giardia, which is 8 to 12 microns, cryptosporidium, which is 4 to 6 microns, and bacteria such as E. coli and Salmonella range from 0.2 to 4 microns. And viruses are much smaller than a micron. Generally, only a few filters, such as ultrafilters and reverse osmosis, have holes small enough to assure removal of all viruses. However, viruses can be killed using a disinfectant. After the water has been filtered, a disinfectant, for example chlorine or chloramine, may be added in order to kill any remaining parasites, bacteria, and viruses, and to protect the water from germs when it is piped to homes and businesses. According to the CDC, most communities use chlorine or chloramines as mentioned above. A chloramine is a group of chemical compounds that contain chlorine and ammonia. Monochloramine, in particular, is a commonly used compound that is mixed into water in levels that kill germs but are safe to drink. Physical disinfectants can be used as well. These include UV light, electronic radiation, and heat. So what are the standards for safe drinking water? The standards are mandated by the EPA, which follows processes set forth by the Safe Drinking Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act is the federal law that protects public drinking water supplies throughout the nation. Under the SDWA, the EPA sets standards for drinking water quality and implements various technical and financial programs that ensure drinking water safety as defined by levels of contaminants found to be harmful to humans. The National Primary Drinking Water Regulations are legally enforceable primary standards and treatment techniques that apply to public water systems. Primary standards and treatment techniques protect public health by limiting the levels of contaminants in drinking water. There is a long list of contaminants with the levels that are required for safe drinking water listed by the EPA, but the main categories are microorganisms, disinfectants, disinfectant byproducts, inorganic chemicals, organic chemicals, and radionuclides. You can find the complete NPDWR table at the link that I've listed on this slide. So what if you don't have these regulations and institutions that protect the precious resource that is water? Well, waste and contaminants in drinking sources aren't accounted for, which can lead to health issues for many communities. And this is what we call wastewater. So what exactly is wastewater? Wastewater can mean different things to different people with a large number of definitions in use. In general, the UN Habitat defines wastewater as a combination of one or more of domestic effluent consisting of black water, which has excreta, urine, and fecal sludge in it, and gray water, which is kitchen and bathing wastewater. Water from commercial establishments and institutions, including hospitals, industrial effluent, storm water and other urban runoff, agricultural, horticultural, and aquaculture effluent, either dissolved or as a suspended matter. So why is wastewater important? Well, 10% of the world's population relies on food grown with contaminated wastewater. Global populations are increasing rapidly, and as the population increases, so does the production of wastewater and the number of people vulnerable to the impacts of severe wastewater pollution. The ability to manage wastewater impacts the natural capacity of marine and aquatic ecosystems. Wastewater that is unmanaged can be a source of pollution and a hazard for the health of human populations and the environment alike. So, as you can see, the quality of water that is returned to the environment is important for society, the economy, and the world around us in general. Managing wastewater is an important thread that helps hold our societies and cultures together. 1% of the Earth's fresh water is available for withdrawal and human use. So it's important to manage that portion we waste and steward it with technology that can ultimately return that portion back to us in the form of fresh drinking water. So can wastewater be used as a feasible source of drinking water? The city of Sweetwater, Texas wrote a report in 1993 about the feasibility of using effluent from wastewater treatment to increase the city's water supply. The reported preliminary estimates to build a facility for reusing wastewater was between $2.6 and $3.9 million, and it was determined that brine separation, coagulation, and filtration was the most economical alternative capable of producing acceptable water quality from the reclaimed water from wastewater treatment. The conclusions from the feasibility analysis found that the unit cost of wastewater reuse weren't out of line with other viable water supply projects for Sweetwater. Furthermore, if there were plans to develop additional water supply by a series of smaller projects, reuse seems to be a viable part of the water supply system. So this all sounds great, but what about that millions of dollar project? How do you find funding for that? Well, there are federal, state, and local sources that can help. This study specifically mentioned the State Revolving Loan Fund, administered through the Texas Water Development Board. Furthermore, cities also have general funds that can help finance projects such as this that can maximize wastewater potential. Ultimately, the process of turning wastewater into drinking water is very similar to the wastewater treatment process. It just takes meeting those requirements as defined by the EPA and creating a treatment system that is most beneficial to a particular community with the resources they can contribute. The World Health Organization has detailed many of the factors that go into potable reuse of wastewater and also lists cases of cities with the methods they used to create a wastewater treatment system that added back to their potable water resources. Potable reuse is a practical source of drinking water, but typically is complex, and proponents need to have sufficient resources and capabilities for successful implementation. Beyond the treatment process we have already discussed in the previous slides, they discuss further types of advanced treatment, such as microfiltration, which only allows particles smaller than zero point 0.1 microns to pass through it. And pathogenic microorganism removals are validated through a combination of manufacturer testing and documentation of on-site performance for the indigenous removal of Giardia, Cryptosporidium, and colophages. Two of the most commonly used methods in microfiltration are dead-end and cross-flow setups. The dead-end microfiltration has supply sent directly to the layer and will thus form a layer of filtrate on the supply side of the membrane surface. This layer contains all particles that have been separated on the basis of their size. This layer can periodically be rinsed away and disposed of. In the cross-flow setup, the liquid is passed along the membrane surface at a particular speed. The things that can permeate the filtration unit pass through the membrane, and the larger particles are left behind in a concentrated flow. The hardened layer left behind is then removed, and this is how it creates safe drinking water. There's also advanced oxidation process using the UV system, and reverse osmosis, which is a process by which a solvent passes through a porous membrane in the direction opposite to that for natural osmosis when subjected to a hydrostatic pressure greater than the osmotic pressure. So essentially, in reverse osmosis, we're using hydrostatic pressure to create a gradient that only allows clean water to come through. There are challenges to creating drinkable water from wastewater, however. Source wastewaters are very poor quality water with high concentrations of microbial pathogens and can potentially contain a broad range of chemical contaminants as well. In general, the process includes the use of complex treatments, and there is a need for high level of technical expertise and understanding. The consequences of failure could be high if these processes and techniques are not implemented correctly. And there are concerns about the use of wastewater as a source of drinking water. So this needs to be addressed by education and public participation especially. All this is to say that on the other hand, there is a lot that goes into this process that isn't feasible for just any place to implement. This is a very unfortunate reality since low resource areas of the world could use this method the most. It takes funding, resources, and multiple personnel to ensure that the water reaches the quality it needs to be drinkable. With that being said, there are places all over the world like Namibia, Orange County, California, Singapore, and Australia that are implementing the treatment of wastewater to recycle and replenish their water stores. In my personal opinion, it would be worth putting money into research to try and create water treatment facilities that could cut down on some of the costs without losing the water quality. Furthermore, there can be a stigma associated with using wastewater as a renewable drinking water source. People may express concerns about the smell of the water or the fact that this is a previously contaminated water source. It would not only take financial resources, but a big push from an educational and political standpoint to reinforce the benefits of using wastewater as a drinkable water source. So in summary, coagulation and flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, and disinfection are the main steps that create safe drinking water. Safe drinking water is defined by containing levels of contaminants below the threshold found to be deemed safe by the EPA. Wastewater is a combination of one or more of the following: domestic effluent, water from commercial establishments and institutions including hospitals, industrial effluent, storm water and other urban runoff, and agricultural, horticultural, and aquaculture effluent, either dissolved or as suspended matter. There are multiple cases of cities that have developed water treatment programs that reuse wastewater for drinking water and other purposes, so this technique is indeed a feasible one. But one of the main challenges to this method is a complex treatment process that requires a high level of technical expertise and understanding, and it can have some pretty costly techniques as well. Here are the references I used throughout the presentation. I found that the EPA and the CDC were especially great resources for learning more about water quality and safety if anyone is interested in further research on this topic. Thank you all so much for coming to Grand Rounds, and I hope you enjoyed learning more about the process behind creating drinkable water and using wastewater as a potential source of drinking water. I hope you all have an excellent day, and thank you again.